The NSSF will give you numbers. People have to contribute to that fund on a mandatory basis. So it can give you a good baseline of how many people are being paid formally and how much are they getting in contributions. People who had 100 million in savings plus was less than 5%. It's actually scary. So you ask yourself, where is everybody else?
Do you aspire for a booming middle-class economy? Listen along, understand what turns the wheels in Uganda's economy with our line of incredible influencers in their fields.
Dear Patriot, welcome yet to another episode of the segment on sectors on the podcast on Uganda. We are so lucky today. We have Kevin Walakira. He is the strategy manager and quality assurance officer at the Bank of Uganda. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. Glad to be here, Aggie.
Allow me to just dive right into it, Kevin. You have quite a lot of experience, close to a decade in the banking sector, and you've actually worked across a variety of strategic and risk management roles. So now, just to kick things off in a fun way, if you had to describe your approach of strategic risk management in just 3 words, what would those be?
Collected, patient.
Great.
Like you said before, I've run a career in banking. I was primarily a programmer and somehow I ended up here, like we all do. Somehow you find yourself on a journey, and when you track 10, 15 years, and it's so different from what you thought you would be doing now. So I thought I would be a programmer at the beginning, did some development at the start, joined the banking industry as a person. I think at the time we're trying to implement like a software solution, and somehow we ended up staying in the organization. The way I look at most of the things we have done, most of the concepts we have been, at least being part of it, the idea is new, it hasn't been done in the organization. So you build the idea as the organization grows. That's why I say patient. You grow things patiently. I'll give a small example. Risk management in financial institutions. Mainstream risk management, which was known, was financial risk management. But now when you look at it, there's another side to risk management, which is operational risk. You don't know where to put it on the organogram. You don't know how to introduce it into the organization. And that was like my first part. I think those were my first 4 or 5 years. That was risk management, but then I was doing business continuity, which is also was a new area because not very many organizations plan for disasters and having plan B.
Yeah.
But then you can imagine 15 years down the road, COVID hits, and you're glad that you planned around contingency arrangements.
You have given us such a beautiful primer into this episode, and I like your keywords, which are calm, collected, patient. You've briefly hinted on how you got started into your role, which is brilliant. Those words alone, they are interwoven nicely in implementing systems, because you talked about software solutions, designing, development, programming, which is all great, especially for developing an enterprise-wide risk management framework that works across different departments. I wonder if you had one strategy for your risk, how would you scale it across the organizations or the organization's departments? Because I like your background. It's quite nice, but help our listeners understand it better if they're working like on a smaller organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe in the last 5 years, I've gotten into change management. I've done like a couple of certifications there. Sometimes you do these papers to either prove to yourself or to walk around with more swag.
Yeah.
It gives you confidence that you know what you're talking about. So I can see that the introduction of new concepts comes with change management, being intentional about how you introduce risk management. What I know now, which is 15 years later, then what would I have done in year one? Year one would have been, why do we need risk management? Then you get people to buy into the idea. If they buy in, which we actually did, you create a couple of ambassadors in the different units. then you educate them so they also buy in and they can easily influence the people around them about the concept. And adding things like reward programs around people's involvement would actually be a good one. You have to get more creative with how you incentivize people to drive your agenda at the time.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would have done different. The people you involve, give them incentive and the power to influence on. But also, there's also this other part that I forget that has come to my mind. And my organization is kind of conservative. So the people who are the leaders, then imagine you're joining an organization as a 20-something-year-old and you find these old people in the institution. You deal with them like your parents. Maybe that's what they want as well. This is that part where you have to tower the line between getting your job done and culture dynamics with the age group that you're working with. But also, buy-in has to come from the top. If you don't have the buy-in from the top, they won't find your programs. When you have resistance, you don't have who to talk to.
That's a great point that you touch on right there. You seem to have disconnect with the generations at work. In my 9 to 5, I had an opportunity to host a webinar that predominantly was having guests that were from the Gen Z. And it was just nice to hear how brilliant these young minds are and how active and proactive they want to make some changes at the workplace. But for this conversation, would you take us back 15 years down the line, how people managed risk, or if they did at all? How were organizations managing their risks, and what kind of strategies were they choosing to do or not to do based on what their objectives were? And what are the changes you're seeing today as compared to managing their risks?
This is inception of risk management as a practice. There was no clear process to implementing risk management. Normally, what my observation has been is when the place is very hazy, there's a couple of people who have been much proactive and find a framework they can teach. But then the next thing comes to standards, because to make something very repeatable, people create a standard around it. So there's a whole business line around standards. I remember when we began, we started risk management used as a business continuity first. But when you look around, what could go wrong? Not so many people were seeing that as a real issue until you take and see these are the possible things that actually can stop your business from running. Given that we had no things to do with, let's say, like pandemics, you had no risk strategies on pandemic. But then the things you had active control is like, what do you do when power goes off? Because that is a Ugandan situation, really.
Yeah.
Then you say, okay, you need backup generators. There's the investment part that the organization has to make so that they have contingencies according to the risk. So I'm giving that as an example.
Yeah.
Also, every business unit was unique in its own way, but you could see that at that time, investment in IT wasn't that high.
You took on after him.
I don't know how I ended up there, but somehow I got there. But I remember seeing an image with him counting money.
Yeah.
But down the line, you have to make the investment in processes, strong rooms to keep the money. I'm looking back 15. I had said about standards. So standards give you what to do proactively, but also when you have a standard, the body that I know that kind of ate up the one I had started with, we used to have the British standard. I think you've heard of ISO. I remember the ISO comes on board and then swallows up the British standard. I remember the business continuity used to have something called BS, which is British Standard 25999 for business continuity. If you're going to practice business continuity, you would basically follow their process because British Standard was for Britain. But I think America also had its own. So you find that whoever is making faster moves gets swallowed up by the other. What I remember is ISO swallowed up the British Standard. One of the best things that happens is finding standardization, because the standardization gives you like a body of work that you can use to implement.
Wait a minute. Do you know what it will take for Uganda to achieve a middle-class economy by 2040? please send us an email at onuganda@gmail.com.
That specialty into an organization in an orderly manner. You have something to run back on, or even when you need capacity building, there is someone you say, do you have ISO this? So I train against that. When I come to my organization, I tell my organization, this is a standard we've chosen, we are running with it. And then you build capacity on a standard. It helps on continuity as well.
Is ISO still the SOP you're following, or most of you follow in your practice?
Yeah, right now, like I said, ISO swallowed up some of the standards before. I think there's others in the industry, because any industry that has a standard, it's a money-making venture. It's a business of its own. So your job is to find more adaptability for a standard. Then create the body of work. There's the training component, train people against that body of work as we improve upon it. Sometimes they even go much further and also certify the institution against the standard. You can be deployed with a skill to implement in the organization. Then the body can also come and say, you're ISO certified as an organization. So those are things that happen in the marketplace. I look at where's the money, where's the business in this.
Now that sounds familiar when someone said that they were ISO certified. Now I think it rings a bell. You've also been involved in strategic performance management. You mentioned that it was quite difficult to get the mindset change of the older generation in your workplace to get on board with risk management. But how do you align your strategic risk management plan with the broader organizational goals so that the performance and the risk mitigation go hand in hand?
One of the challenges is to give legitimacy to what the work, and part of giving legitimacy to the work is to give it a home, like a risk department or a strategy department. Because any investment that comes, they say, who do we give the money to? If the organization gives the money to departments, you had better have a department for the thing. Otherwise, it will be eaten up or subsumed somewhere to share money with somebody else. The people implementing have to find a way. The people I'm talking about are people who needed authority. If I have a head of department, then there's a unit, and risk management is a unit. Now, for the people in the older days, how does a unit give instructions to a head of department? You're breaking hierarchy. But if the role of strategy or risk management as an entity is at the same level as every department, when you give an instruction, you're giving an instruction to a peer. So,
and is your risk strategy based off of the general strategic objectives or strategic plan of the company?
The only part which we are lucky about is that over the years, they've been under the same umbrella. They've always had one head, and then there are two units, but under an executive who is managing both. But they are two different sciences. You cannot have them under one person. I'm looking at how to implement it. It depends on the approach. If you're going to do your strategy, part of strategy comes with choosing a method of how you do your strategy. Risk management is part of strategy because you have to ask yourself at a certain point in your planning, what may make us fail to achieve our objectives. Still, at the strategy side, you'll have created the strategy. And part of that also is to choose a method. And there's very many on the market. The one I'm very familiar with is the balanced scorecard. You formulate around that method and use that method as a guide to create the strategy at the top. We call that corporate, and then you take it down to the departments using the same structure. Risk management is you saying what would go wrong and how would we avert it from going wrong. It's basically coming in to aid, make sure that your plan is right, but it's its own entity as well. So it becomes strategic risk management.
Complements the strategy overall, which makes perfect sense, especially in this day and age. You talked about the trends having changed from the different risks back in the day. Today, they are more operational. I can imagine cyber, especially for banks. I think your background as a programmer, developer, or software solution person or provider places you in such a unique position for you to be able to manage cyber threats. You talked about automation and all those repetitive tasks. How has automation and data really changed the game? Because I think it has done quite a lot. Given your experience in the banking sector, what is one of the most rewarding projects or initiatives that you've worked on that has had significant impact on the organization?
Let me start with automation and data. Normally, before you automate, you have to go through the hard work of doing manual processes. Then you can look for a tool that can automate. That's why I think I like people on the development side. If you feel your process works, then the job of the person to automate is to find the ways to automate your manual process. I'm looking at automation. Most of the work we do is mainly database. I know anyone who's going to work with data on the manual side is going to find themselves in an Excel sheet. I remember we had video games in Excel. That's how strong that tool is.
Okay.
You can only do as much as the task that comes to you in Excel. You'll find somebody who does Excel and you're like, what is in this Excel? As in, it's that versatile a tool. You can do models in it. There's people who do models in it and I've never even seen an application outside Excel. I know that Excel as a tool for starters is good. When you go to the data, now how you collect the data is a whole other agenda. I think the age that you get is being able to make data-based decisions, but also finding ways to visually express that data. The last part is analysis on trend, because the more you collect, the more you can have prediction from the past. You'll find that if you keep it in Excel and somebody else comes along, you said, what project have I worked on in that end? One of the fun projects that I worked on, and there is something called a business impact analysis. The premise of it is map out what the processes are in your business, then find, depending on what the mission of your organization is, what are the critical processes that define why you exist. At a minimum, if something happened, we have terms that they call recovery time objectives and all those stuff like that. But the whole concept goes, if you have to be down for a day, on day 2, for example, what do you bring up first?
Yeah.
You'll find that certain units are not as important as the other. If I'm running an organization that does payments infrastructure has to be fast. Then the next part is to map out the process end to end and then find out who plays a role in the process so that you plan according to the process. I'm going to look for a department that finds itself very low on the hierarchy plan of business continuity, like audit. When we're in chaos, this is what we want with audit. We need the house in order first. We need business to run fast before you can call in an audit. So it goes low on the priority list. That's the project that I think I worked on, just to see what is important and how to resource it.
In terms of risk management, have you worked on a project that you've probably predicted, say, a crisis and it really happened, or during a crisis that your skills came in handy?
One of the good thing is that for the time I've had my career, I've not had an incident that has been. I think organizations do it, attack and penetration test. On the cyber side, you call in someone to try and get into your system. Then, depending on what gaps they can see, you reinforce accordingly. That does help. If it's something that you do every now and then, you'll find that the portals for entry are lessened. Then you find yourself not having many incidents of pilferage.
Yeah.
I've actually done more simulations of chaos than the chaos itself.
You're very well prepared, just like we are for pandemics. Uganda has a good rep on that.
I remember in most of the scenario planning, when we would discuss pandemic, we unanimously would say those things are for other countries, they're not for our country. We didn't have a plan for a pandemic. We had plans of when power is off, what do you do? When a person is sick and there's an alternate person. We had enough contingency, but when it came to pandemic, that one, was a special one.
You've been getting certified in risk management, KPI. I saw that on your LinkedIn. What other opportunities, especially within risk management, if there's an investor listening in today and they probably are interested in investing here in Uganda, or there's just a young person listening to the podcast and would want to get into risk management, what are the opportunities you're seeing from where you sit?
I'm going to look at banking itself as the one I'm very familiar with, although I see it cutting across. If you work with a regulator and the regulator says you need risk management, it means that all organizations will be assessed. They'll have to comply to those new requirements. Having skills there puts you in a good position because there's no masters in risk management on the market. Most of it is specialty based. There's no degree in that. The purpose of a person hiring you is because they don't want to start at zero. It's a person who already has maybe some experience doing the thing. Most of us, we can't run away from this part where we like papers and stuff. My choice for certifications is that they don't take too long to do. The only tricky part that I see is if you stack up papers without experience, that's also like a problem itself. My logic is reverse. Get into the role. As you do the role, certify.
Fantastic advice. I feel like a few people want to just do one thing, yet you could do them concurrently and it works well. Get the experience, but as well as the paper.
It's a bad thing when you have the paper and you've never experienced the real thing.
Exactly. So do them both so that you're on the safe side.
I'm with that. There's some people who are not.
Yeah.
Some people like just papers.
What kind of challenges are you facing?
This is a problem that faces large institutions. I don't think these are problems that happen with small. There's something called organizational culture. It's becoming like a typical thing. So I've seen two areas that are coming out very big. That's organizational change management and then culture. Because what I've seen over time is the bigger the group of people, the more intentional you have to be about the practices or the kind of organization that you're trying to run. Then you have to become much more intentional about what activities. I'm looking at. In Uganda is easier if they say bolombolombo.
Yeah.
The character traits that you want in the people, and then how do you make sure that they stay embedded in the people?
Yeah.
Given that you're running big numbers, then you have people who come in and out, and you want them to be like everybody else. That second one is change management, where you have to take care of change management for that culture to stay. I think it's not a problem of small companies. A set of 5 people, small companies, I think that's one of the reasons why some companies decide to stay small and keep on outsourcing whenever they need. It's easy to have a small group run in a certain way. A family of 5 is easy. When it's now a tribe, you have to be more intentional about how the tribesmen walk the talk and all those things.
So would that be the change you'd create if you had the opportunity to?
Yeah, where do you want to go? And then you come up with a proper method on how you can get that change.
Yeah, brilliant.
That's where it goes.
The last question we actually ask every guest that comes onto the podcast.
I'm ready.
It's about achieving a middle-class economy. What do you think it's going to take for Uganda to achieve a middle-class economy from where you sit?
This is also some of the data you're going to find. Let's say like when you go to NSSF, the NSSF will give you numbers. People have to contribute to that fund on a mandatory basis. So it can give you like a good baseline of how many people are being paid formally and how much are they getting in contributions. It at least gives you a small indicator of who are the employed. Now we go into the ones who do business and may not be following those rules. When you look at the numbers with NSSF, I think there's a time they did that people who had 100 million in savings plus was less than 5%. It's actually scary.
Yeah.
So you ask yourself, where is everybody else? We have a young population that is mainly unemployed.
That's true.
When you look at some of the other places you can try and track exactly. You ask yourself, what industries are really growing? The purpose of middle class economy most of the time is it's that group of people that move money the most. If you don't have enough middle class people, there's not enough businesses that can be supported because they are the ones spending. If they are a bigger number and they're spending, more money is moving. But you'll find that the people who are in the higher class, the millionaires, he's the one moving the most money, but it's just a small set of people. And theirs is industry based. But who supports the shop nearby? It's the middle class guy. It's the middle class guy who is in traffic. They're the ones who are in the bars. Sometimes a good KPI for middle class is what's going on in the bars for Uganda, because our nightlife is a good indicator of how the money is really moving. It's a trait in our country that even when I talk to my friends who come from other countries, they say something is weird about Uganda, call it the night economy. People say you're broke at night.
They're spending.
So what will get us to a middle class economy?
What is the threat?
The threat that I see, if you have more unemployment and it's a young population, they are willing to take big risks. They are willing to throw everything for a reset. They'll choose a reset and destroy everything. That's the risk that I see.
What will it take?
What does it take? Like we always say, employ the people, keep them busy.
Who is this message going to? Government, private sectors, the Ugandan, the patriot?
The government creates the environment. The businesses, if they're given a good environment, those things can happen because part of business is leverage. Leverage is through capital, some of the leverage is through people. So if people is one of the ways that you leverage just to scale, that's what we call it scaling. The government will provide the environment, but I know that the real people to make the change is the businesses. That's where the change can happen.
Okay, Kevin, thank you so much for this episode and to share with us your insights along your journey of over 15 years. But I wonder if someone wanted to follow up with your conversation, if something wasn't clear or they wanted to build up on what you mentioned, where can we find you? I know for sure you're on LinkedIn. Where else should we find you?
I used to dabble a lot. Instagram is my home.
Okay.
You see, there's the LinkedIn guy, then there's the Instagram guy. I see those two as two different guys, but it's still the same person. Name is Kevin MC Casa. LinkedIn, my LinkedIn has Kevin Walakira, but the middle name is MC Casa. You find me there.
Wonderful. Okay, Kevin, thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all the time we had for today. I hope as one patriot or two have taken some knowledge about risk management and strategy, and for them to be able to incorporate that in their ordinary business and also help us achieve the middle class economy that we strive for. Have a good night.
The whole thing right now is middle class economy, and I can maybe put a parting shot in that direction. But I've been working for the last 15 years, and for some reason, I work in a very conservative environment. So I'm kind of headstrong about keeping my identity and not delving into, even if you work in a certain institution where maybe the culture is boxing you up, find an outlet, find something that gives you an expression of yourself outside your work. My bigger fear is this. Most of us say for the normal work, you retire at 60, but these days with life expectancy going so up, what do you do? What defines you outside the work that you've done? I say you need to find that escape, something that transcends what you do at your 9 to 5. So I'm headstrong on that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kevin. That was a nice way to end the episode. So have yourself a good night and we will be in touch. Good luck.
All right.
Thank you for listening in this far. I really hope that this conversation was helpful to you. Share this episode with your colleagues or friends that you think will benefit from this information.
Let them know what you're listening to.
Would you also rate our podcast? Because once you rate our podcast, other people like you are able to listen to this information and use it to their own benefit. On a lighter note, follow us on TikTok and Instagram. We really would love to hear your